and I am going to get underway. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us at the session around the Targeted Early Intervention Program Aboriginal Case Management Policy, which is a huge mouthful, but it is such a critical piece of work. I acknowledge the Gadigal people as the custodians of the land on which I am working today, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. This was, is and always will be Aboriginal land. I acknowledge the custodians of all of the lands on which we come to this meeting. I'm not going to waste any time. Because there's a fair bit of content that we want to get to. So I'm just going to welcome Bill Pritchard and Julie Walsh from AbSec and Anthony Shannon from DCJ, who is a very familiar face in this forum. FAMS was really pleased to be able to work with AbSec and DCJ on what a TEI Aboriginal case management policy would look like. The ACMP is a long-standing document in the out-of-home care space and the residential care space. It's very familiar, but there's absolutely necessity for it to have broad applicability across all of the organisations that are working with Aboriginal children, young people and families. And so for there to be an early intervention version of this policy is just critical and timely in all of the work that we are doing. So thank you, Bill and Julie, for joining us. Julie, I know you're in charge of slides, so I'm getting my hand off of the mouse. Bill, I'm going to start with you to introduce the document, and then if people have questions, you can pop them in the chat. Otherwise, unmute yourself and just ask. These sessions are always more valuable when they are interactive, but there's time to get through the content, and then there's definitely time to ask questions at the end. So, Bill, over to you.
Well, thank you, Julie, and thank you for the kind acknowledgement. My name's Bill Pritchard. I'm coming to you today from Wiradjuri country, and I also like to acknowledge my elders, the elders of the nations on whichever country you're on today. Our future elders, also I especially want to acknowledge the stolen generations and those of the stolen generations who haven't had the opportunity to come home, and also especially our children who have I suppose been part of the system, this is the policy is all about how we actually make better outcomes for Aboriginal children and families. It's the most important policy. A bit of background on me, I suppose. I was 7 years I was CEO of AbSec. That was about 7 years ago, and I'd just come back and done another stint for about 13 months. It was supposed to be a 2-month gig, and it lasted 13 months. always fun. I'm still doing a little bit of work for AbSec around the ACMP policy. Hence I'm here today. I've worked with governments, I suppose, altogether for about 25 years, and I've worked in the NGO sector, I suppose, for about 15 years. My whole working life has been in the basically in the sector in Aboriginal policy. In all that time, this is the most important policy I've seen developed. It's crucial at this time. It fits in with the Closing the Gap recommendations. And it also, if it's implemented appropriately, it will make a difference. So I truly believe that. And targeted earlier intervention, I see as one of the most important components of it. We need to actually, and you'll see as we go through the presentation, that it is about putting more effort into the front end, and that'll hopefully lead to less expenditure and less poorer outcomes at the tertiary end. And again, that'll come through So, and I consider the TEI players to be, organisations to be the most important players in this, because if we get the early intervention right, we will make a real difference. And we're realistic about it. The earlier intervention needs to be expanded to make this work, and that's both on the Aboriginal side and the non-Aboriginal side. So, what I'm this is going to get really confusing because we've got two Julies. How about I go Julie? Yeah, I'll Julie Welsh and Julie, because I really I want the presentation so you can have a basic understanding. Some of you may have read the policy, all 90 pages or whatever it is. Some of you may have read the practice procedures, and some of you may have read the early intervention fact sheet, which Anthony will be talking to after we finish the presentation. And I think if we then Anthony does his presentation, and then we can have a Q&A after that. But I will hand over to Julie, and I'll be available for any questions. And Julie does a great presentation, and I hope you find it very informative, and I hope we get some feedback from you, because like I say, for this to work, we need you on board. So thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And I'm just getting in here now to bring up the slideshow. There we go. Now everybody can see that, can't you guys? So yes, and I'm really happy then. Wonderful. Okay, thank you, Julie and Bill, for your acknowledgement to country. And I too, it's very important for me as an Aboriginal woman, as a Gomeroi Mudawari woman, to also follow that protocol. Therefore, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Julie Welsh. I'm a Gomeroi Mudawari woman, originally from Gunnedah. I grew up very much part of the Redfern community for a very, very long time. Acknowledging our elders, past, present, and emerging, and also acknowledging country, and the country where we are all on today, coming in and being in this space together for this incredibly important conversation. I too acknowledge my ancestors and everybody's ancestors as we come together. As a descendant like Bill, I'd like to acknowledge the stolen generations, particularly those children that did not make it home. Acknowledging our children today that are in the out-of-home care, away from their families, away from community, and from their off-country. And one of the wonderful things that we can do is recognise that as of the hundreds of Aboriginal nations across this continent, not one gave up their sovereignty. Our warriors, our ancestors fought for this land. So remembering that wherever you are, wherever you walk today, you walk on Aboriginal land. Sovereignty never ceded. Me being fairly new to AbSec, I certainly would like to acknowledge the incredible work AbSec has undertaken to develop the New South Wales Aboriginal Case Management Policy on behalf of the New South Wales Government. Through this presentation, we will outline the process of developing the New South Wales Aboriginal Case Management Policy, give a brief overview of the key principles and features of the policy, and provide an update of where things are now. Through the co-design process, a plan was established to achieve a more effective child and family service system for Aboriginal children, one by and for Aboriginal communities, which identified five key levers for change, including establishing an Aboriginal policy driven by stakeholders. So take a good read of number 3 there and take that in. This is significant in communities' voice for our children and regarding our self-determination. Me coming from a community development background and recognising staff in community that live and breathe self-determination and having a strong voice for our community. And hearing this language of community-led, strong community voice, this recognises the leadership, skills, expertise, and cultural ways of doing. Our communities know what's best for our children and families. So this is incredibly exciting work, but also way overdue. Firstly, AbSec led the community consultations with Aboriginal stakeholders to set the scope of the policy. Then the AbSec youth ambassadors had their say about what they wanted to get from the policy. And as we know, young people who have experienced, lived through the system are the experts in the room. What was heard clearly was that they didn't want an out-of-home care policy. They wanted a policy that spanned the whole continuum and was focused on prevention and early intervention. There were then 10 community engagement sessions across New South Wales, as well as an open survey for those who could not make it face-to-face. In total, more than 300 individuals and organisations participated, including Aboriginal community stakeholders, non-Aboriginal NGOs and government agencies, such as health, education and justice. Through this intensive consultation process, 7 key principles were established to guide case management practice, but also embed Aboriginal-led approaches. In brief, we heard that they wanted case management that is child-focused, that was centred on the needs of Aboriginal children and promotes lifelong well-being, facilitates Aboriginal family-led decision-making, values community involvement in supporting families, including self-determination and advocacy, is culturally embedded, recognising culture is a key factor for resilience for our children and families. And for us as Aboriginal people, this is a given. Number 5, they wanted a case management that delivers holistic services tailored to the needs of Aboriginal children and families. Number 6 is aimed to prevent harm and preserve families. And finally, a principle that certainly came through loud and clear is that our communities want a case management practice that is accountable to our communities. Aboriginal stakeholders saw a system that was rather linear for too many of our children, that once they fell into it, they continued through the out-of-home care system and formed an intergenerational cycle of harm. As community members, we all know and see many of our families in communities experience this intergenerational cycle of 3 or 4 generations or more of children being removed. And we all understand the fear our communities live in. And this needs to stop. Therefore, it was loud and clear again. They wanted an approach to case management that was more proactive in responding to risk early, 2, preventing an escalation of risk and harm, and 3, working effectively to preserve families. They wanted a case management system that was capable of keeping children safe at home and supported to grow up strong in family, community and culture, that respected the importance of identity and connection for our children. So here, you fellas know these charts way better than I do. So tier 1, which is the yellow on the chart, as you know, it's all about getting in early on the continuum and to be focused on tier 1 and tier 2 so that our children and families aren't going anywhere near tier 3. This is the investment that we need. During AbSec's consultations, we found that there were core concepts that were understood differently or that needed to be clearly articulated in order to support consistency. These included concepts of well-being for Aboriginal children and families, understanding family and kinship processes from our perspective, and the importance of these systems of relationships in the safety and well-being of our children and families, as well as understanding, as noted earlier, that culture is essential to Aboriginal child and family supports. This means that services must support and be designed and delivered by Aboriginal communities and aligned to the values, perspectives and priorities of our communities. At the end of the day, community has the solutions. Our experts, our elders, our cultural educators, our warriors have the answers. An area of concern for many of our stakeholders was the current understanding of the principle of best practice, of best interest, which tends to be somewhat narrowly applied with respect to Aboriginal children and young people. Our communities wanted to see a broader understanding that considered the rights of Aboriginal children more holistically. Also, the Aboriginal child placement principles are often understood incredibly narrowly, usually being considered only with respect to the placement hierarchy. Now we're getting down to some good yarns here. The ACMP includes a number of key elements to enable the principles to be achieved in practice. Some we've already discussed and are likely to be relatively well understood, such as the importance of Aboriginal-led decision-making processes. We have included the proactive efforts standard, including or placing the obligation on the service system to actively support families with appropriate and timely services. We have also included the need to develop more appropriate assessment frameworks. Finally, there is the local Aboriginal community controlled mechanism. That is, processes developed by local community members to represent their communities, providing oversight of local processes affecting their children and families. Therefore, these community-controlled mechanisms work with DCJ and services to ensure Aboriginal children and families are supported and cared for in accordance with the principles of self-determination, the Aboriginal child placement principles, and the core principles of the ACMP. And we'll talk more about their community-controlled mechanisms, but first, proactive efforts. So have a little read through that list, and one thing that we'll make sure is that we'll provide a copy of this PowerPoint presentation for everybody. So the deal is, practitioners take meaningful steps to proactively support families according to the principles. Proactive efforts begin at the earliest possible time and ensure that due diligence is given to the attention of an Aboriginal child or young person's individual situation and is tailored to their needs. This includes identifying all family connections, particularly disengaged or unidentified parents, and proactively supporting ongoing connections to siblings and extended family. And that term extended family is very much a Western term. When we refer to that, to family, we simply refer to family. So what does this mean for Aboriginal staff when we're talking to the DCJ mob, and who will do all of the work? So one of the things absolutely is that it's just not Aboriginal people's responsibility, it's everybody's responsibility. Each district right now has the responsibility to implement the Aboriginal case management policy. AbSec is supporting this process led by our CEO, John Lehar, ACMP lead and consultant, Bill Pritchard, our executive, Tracy Keevers-Keller, my colleague, Alicia Johnson, who gives her apologies, she wasn't able to come today, and myself. And one of the things that we acknowledge is, particularly with Aboriginal staff in this sector, in all of our sectors when it comes to our children, is their cultural knowledge and understandings of community is incredibly important. But one of the things is that it's everybody's responsibility, and it's incredibly important that everybody comes on board and champions the ACMP. Now, this is the good yarns in regards to the mechanisms. So these community-controlled mechanisms are a way by which Aboriginal communities can oversee the delivery of local case management processes for Aboriginal children and families within their area, using local Aboriginal standards, expectations, and experiences. The Aboriginal community-controlled mechanisms within local communities operate accordingly to the following principles. Culturally appropriate approaches are the foundations for the care and support provided to Aboriginal children and young people and their families. Aboriginal understandings of health and well-being, holistic understandings of a child or young person's circumstances, strengths-based, family-centred and trauma-informed approaches are applied in practice to achieve best interests for the child. Open and collaborative relationships between family, communities, service providers and the departments. Do note, the community-controlled mechanisms do not oversee or make decisions around individual children or young people. Their focus is the practice process when working with our families. The Aboriginal community-controlled mechanisms represent how local communities want to have input into the supports provided by DCJ and service providers in the care of their children. They are based on local community and cultural knowledge. As each community is unique, these processes will vary from community to community. So what would an Aboriginal community-controlled mechanism look like in community? As you know, our communities are incredibly diverse. Therefore, it depends on how the local communities would want to set up their community-controlled mechanism. And they are the ones that make that decision. Right now, DCJ or the districts are going through that process, and there will be trial and error in working with community. Our ACMP lead, Bill Pritchard, does give examples of what some of these mechanisms could look like. It could be a panel of 5 to 6 community experts. It could be a pool of 20 to 30 community members who are called upon to make a quorum and bring particular expertise. Or it could possibly be an individual set up to represent the community. Or it could simply be something completely different. One of the challenges, of course, is having a strong representation across community. We can also think about existing panels that are up and running that could become the community-controlled mechanism. But again, we need to ask those questions around who is missing from the panel, and is all of community supportive of that panel taking on the community-controlled mechanism role. So these are kind of some questions that just get put out, to people such as you fellas, when we have these conversations, particularly with the DCJ staff. So what's already in place? Has the community had a say about how things should run? Does your current systems and processes allow community to have oversight of the implementation? What needs to change? And do you need to work more with community to develop trust? One of the things that we say when we have these conversations is that AbSec and our DCJ representatives here today, which I think is Anthony, I'm not too sure if you're on, Rebecca, is that we're not the important fellas. So one of the things is that we recognise is that it's the frontline staff that are going to be implementing the ACMP are the important ones. And so this is where it's really important that everybody needs to come on board. So moving forward, this is where we're at the moment. So we've just we've had our conversations with our district directors and executives around the state. We've just completed having all the different conversations with the Aboriginal reference groups and Aboriginal staff within DCJ across the districts, across the state. And we're at that process now with supporting the presentations to Aboriginal communities and Aboriginal community-controlled organisations in understanding the ACMP and the starts of the developing of setting up those mechanisms in their communities. Anthony's now going to speak a little bit to you in regards to the fact sheet, in regards to the targeted early intervention. And Bill, you might want to have that yarn in regards to the e-learning training as well for caseworkers across the sector. So if I could now pass that over to you, Anthony, and I'll stop sharing. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Julie. That's brilliant. Over to you, Anthony.
Thanks, Julie, and thanks, Julie, for that presentation. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and pay my respects to elders past, present and future, and extend that respect to Aboriginal colleagues here today. I'm coming to you today from Wonga land. So as Julie mentioned, the Aboriginal case management policy is a critically important part of the targeted early intervention program, all the way through the TI reform over the last couple of years, and particularly over the last 12 to 18 months as the program's unfolded. What we've looked to do is to continue to support and embed Aboriginal evidence in the program and continue to look to how we can support embedding cultural competent practices across the program. The case management policy is important and it applies to all targeted early intervention services. So recently you would have seen that we sent out a fact sheet to all targeted early intervention providers outlining the case management policy where you can access it, and also providing some information around some training that's available as well on the DCJ website. So I would encourage you to access that online training. It's available now, so please have a look at that. We'll also be talking further with the sector and with districts and together with AbSec to develop more support and resources around the rollout and implementation of the case management policy as well. So I don't really have a lot to say about the fact sheet, just to bring it to your attention and let you know that there will be more support coming, and that we'll be looking to work locally with districts and talk with the sector together with AbSec around what else we can do in terms of supporting the rollout. Thank you. I'll hand over to you, Bill.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, look, as Anthony said, the e-learning, I came in only on about the last 13 months and now 18 months of the ACMP policy, and really, and I was sitting in high level meetings and going, oh, these people seem to know what they're talking about. I'm not getting some of it myself. And it wasn't until I actually looked at the draft, which hasn't changed much, of the e-learning, and I went, now I get it. So I would recommend it. It takes you through a process. It's 3 units, and it will give you a really good overview of how it works, more so than what you could get out of a meeting like today. As I know in the there's varying levels of early intervention. You know, there's intensive case management, there's case management, and then there's like family support. All parts of that are equally important. All have a role in the ACMP. And like I said, I really believe that the TEI is the most, well, I shouldn't say the most important part, but a hugely important part of the policy and the process. There's just a rewrite going on the practice manual at the moment as well, which will be available shortly, I hope. I just saw that draft went away not long ago, so we should be getting that back from DCJ. And I really want to acknowledge all the hard work that DCJ have done on this. We may have been a little bit annoying at some stages, and I also want to acknowledge Julie and her team, because maybe we should have got you in a bit earlier, but things were frantic there for a little while. But it's really good to see that Julie and her team and FAMs are on board and really want to promote this and make it work for us. And look, I think we can be a beacon for the rest of Australia in this. This is unique to New South Wales, and I think if we can get it right and demonstrate it right, it will make a difference not only in New South Wales but in the rest of Australia. I'm open for any questions. If it's outside my realm, if it's like more about the TEI and how it fits, I'll pass back to Julie. Or if it's around the actual internal policies of DCJ, I'll pass back to Anthony. But if anybody's got any questions, feel free to ask.
Thanks for that, Bill. And if anybody wants to type their questions in the chat, please do that. Kim, I can see that you have put the link to the NGO learning for the e-learning modules in the chat. Thank you for that. And we will also send that out in our newsletter with the slides so that everybody has access to them. Bill, I guess the thing that from a FAM's perspective that we really want is to just be encouraging everybody to get on board with this. We shouldn't be doing it because it's mandated. We should be doing it because it's the right thing to do. Beyond these e-learning modules, we know that, that AbSec has the opportunity to provide some funding, support to organisations through the Social Sector Transformation Fund. Mm-hmm. Is that another mechanism that it's designed for small to medium NGOs, which is the cohort that's on this forum this afternoon? Is that another mechanism that AbSec is open to providing some one-on-one support with organisations to consider how they implement it and get it off the ground?
I can't fully answer that. I think it's a great idea. In some ways, it's limited by what was in our service spec on the delivery. I'm sure we can make it fit in there. I don't have any delegations anymore, so I can't actually say, yeah, you can have it all. But that might not go real well past John. Look, I think it's a good idea. We certainly are going to be doing some other things. We're developing, and I think you may have seen it, Julie, I'm not sure, because I'm only working a bit of part-time, but we are doing a self-assessment checklist as well, where people can go, well, what are we doing now? And what do we do? There's a little bit of it in the TEI fact sheet, but there is actually something a bit more comprehensive in the offing. And that's more about, we're not saying, you've got to do your business this way, but this is what ACMP expectations are. Doing all the things you're doing now meet those expectations, and and we've done a couple of test runs with it, and look, a lot of you are doing things that fit really well within the ACMP, but there's always seems to be a couple of gaps. We could do this, and especially around the family engagement. A lot of the TEI providers we find, and Aboriginal TEI providers, funnily enough, on occasions, they work with the family, but they don't work with the extended family. And I think that's something that really needs to be taken into account when you're doing work with Aboriginal family and children, because often, for unknown reasons, Aboriginal families may be estranged from their extended family. They may be off country and a long way away, but we see that as a real opportunity to actually get extended family in to do some of the work for you, really. Supporting them, being a conduit. Because as you know, Aboriginal people can be on occasions reticent to engage, and they can help with engagement as well. So look, there's a lot more work to be done, and we really want to work with this. So anybody comes up with any ideas, let us know. And I will ask John about the SST.
Fabulous. And look, any checklists or any of those resources that AbSec can put out, the sector is always really willing and desperate to engage. But if AbSec can give any guidance so that organisations know where to start, sometimes the most difficult part is knowing where to start. So we put our head in the sand and do nothing rather than just diving in and starting somewhere and being brave enough to get it wrong and dust ourselves off and go again. So any other guidance material that AbSec is putting out, we'll very happily share. And Bill, I think the point about family goes to the point that Julie made earlier on about the definition of family, and that sometimes we just define family far too narrowly. The concept of family and extended family is really important, that we need to just look outside of four walls and what's immediately in front of us. And even if one of the key takeaways is to think about that differently in our work, then that's a really good place to start when we're thinking about working with children. Who touches that child's life and who do we need to be connected to in order to be doing our work?
Yeah, and we're building a cabal of champions of the ACMP, and also we're still hopeful that we'll be able to get a facilitator role in each district as well, which can be a point of first contact. And the champions are out there, and they're in the department. We haven't completed that work yet. We've got a fact sheet for it. We can tell you how it's supposed to work, but we're confident that if we can get Aboriginal people championing it, and non-Aboriginal people as well, that they can be also conduits, because we're only a small part of it as well. Just back on the other one, I did mention that the practice guidance framework and the policy itself are actually having a bit of a rewrite at the moment, because, and I think the practice guidance one is just about to come out, because over the 4 years this has been developed, it has been a really fluid process, and through meetings like this and back and forth, and okay, how would this work? We're actually changing as we're going along, and I think it's even in the 18 months I've been involved, I've actually seen now, okay, we've changed that, but that's changing for the better. The only one I'm concerned about still is that we didn't get any funding for the facilitators, and we think they're a hugely important role in each district. And our dream is, and we'll certainly be putting it up as a budget submission, is that they're important in two ways. That they sit outside of DCJ, but they're engaged with DCJ, so Aboriginal people will feel comfortable engaging with them as well. And they'll have a role in, actually, like I say, in each district, being able to guide people in the right direction. Because it's not easy. If you're dealing with a family from Moree and their extended families up there, how do you engage with them? And we see that as part of the role as a facilitator as well. So there's lots of work to be done, but we are getting there. And DCJ are starting to implement it in practice, some of it. They're obviously all doing the e-learning over the next few months as well, all the casework staff. So there are worries around imposts on the current Aboriginal caseworkers within DCJ, because they've also got a changed role, and that has to be sorted out at the moment anyway. So.
I think that notion of that it's not a launched document and then it sits on a shelf is really critically important. The fact that it is a live document, that it is open to revision and growth as it rolls out, I just think is so important. And I think it's another really key message for this group to take away, is that it's not a yay, but here's the document and here's your deadline to have things done. It's actually about the way that we do good work. It's about ongoing practice and improving our practice and being continually able to check in with what's working locally, making sure that we're connected in what we're doing. There's a question that I can see in the chat about the Aboriginal control group. Julie, you mentioned the Aboriginal control mechanism. Is that something that's being led by DCJ?
No, it's been actually led by community. DCJ are obviously, they have oversight. So they can go in and however often, and it's been done at a district level, but also a more broad community level. So they might know of a child that has ended up in care, and so they have an oversight role. That group or those individuals or can actually have a look. Okay, were the processes followed? Were there things that could have been done better? They don't, like Julie said, they don't make any casework decisions. They don't actually get involved at the early end at all. But if it hasn't been a great outcome, then they have the ability to actually look at it and find out, was it a process failure or was it a casework failure? And it is about, like you said, improving the practice as we go along, and learning from our lessons.
So Bill, how are these groups linked to the local NGO service system?
Well, at the moment they haven't, because they haven't been formed. They're in the processes of it, but they will be when each district finishes establishing them. I should imagine that'll happen at the district level.
So if people are keen to be involved or to know what's going on, is their local DCJ office the place to go to for that, or do they come to AbSec to find out?
At the moment, most
do they go and annoy Anthony?
Yeah, that's fine. No, well, look, certainly there's certain TI things, early intervention things we can't answer. So that's definitely the go-to. But if it's about like ACMs or engagement with communities or anything like that, we're quite happy to participate. The districts, like I say, we're going to have this group we're going to have the champions. When that's established, which must probably be a few months away, they'll be great contacts in the communities, and we'd hope the NGOs, and that's a non-paid role, it's a volunteer role, and we'd hope that the NGO sector will be able to engage with them, maybe even if we don't get the facilitators as a first point of contact.
Fabulous. Anthony, there's a question that I'm going to throw to you, please. Is there a time frame for completing the e-modules, the e-learning modules?
It's not compulsory for NGO sector, but it's highly recommended. I think it's mandated for DCJ staff, Anthony, you might know that. Well, that might have been a question for Beck. I've got a feeling it is mandated.
Yeah, we're encouraging districts to mandate training to be completed by end of February.
There you are. Hello, Beck.
Hello. How are you going, Bill?
All right, you snuck on. I didn't know you were there. Have I told me lies yet?
No, it's all sounding good. Good. Thanks, Bill.
Cheers, mate.
I think from a FAM's perspective, just around completing the modules for e-learning, we've heard loud and clear from the sector that they've been desperate for training around doing better work for Aboriginal children, young people and families. So please take advantage of the free modules that are out there. Once people complete those modules, and we can start to get feedback about what the gaps are and what's missing, so that we can keep making sure that the professional development opportunities are available. And I think, just as a general statement, in the TEI, one of the key priority groups has always been working with Aboriginal children, young people and families. So I think as part of the conversations you should be having with your local DCJ office is around what work you're doing to support your staff work in that that space. I think it's just really, really important as a sector that we start to have the conversations about where the support is, where the gaps are, what we're doing, and how we can be continuing to feed the what's happening local back into some of the systemic conversations, because I think that's where some of the disconnect always is joining those dots. So Kim has put in that she's done the first module, and it's fantastic. They're quite short modules, so we can't encourage people strongly enough to take full advantage of those modules that have been developed.
Yeah, it takes about an hour and a half, so about 4.5 hours in total. Depends if you go back over things, and you get a gold star, Kim.
Excellent. Anthony, do you know, are they just staying up there until they get updated? Are they going to be on NGO Learning site for the entirety? Yep, great.
Yeah, the modules were done over a considerable amount of time. There was a considerable amount of work went into them, and obviously they had to be, as things developed in the policy, then they had to get revamped. And we finally got to a stage where we had, yes, Rebecca pushed the button, good on you, Beck. And we're very happy, because we think that's, like I said, I found it, even for myself, who had a bit of background knowledge in it, actually took me through it when I got the whole concept. So I think it's well worth doing.
Absolutely agree. We don't have any other questions that are coming through. So, Julia, unless there's anything else that has popped into your head during these conversations and the questions, is there anything that you want to add that you haven't covered off on, or you just want to reinforce?
Probably just the e-learning, because I could certainly share my story of when I started at AbSec just a few months ago. Bill gave me that option of looking at the draft as he did of the e-learning, and also, you know, reading that 70-page document to get the understanding. And doing the e-learning just is absolutely, you have great understanding of it once you actually do that. So again, we cannot any more highly recommend than actually doing the e-learning. We will actually provide, I will send through an email with all the different links as well, with the PowerPoint presentation and a couple other documents and links to AbSec's website as well, just to share with the network. And, you know, Bill, are you happy for me to share your details as well, as we usually do, yours and mine, and also
Yes.
AJ from our team? Just if there's any questions that, you know, if people go away and might have a question or two, you know, just to have those yarns, we're here.
Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Bill, I'm going to leave the last word with you. I think I just want to say thank you so much for coming and having this conversation. We need to just get it in front of organisations, encourage them to engage with it, and we just can't stress strongly enough how easily it is to just start to do the e-learning modules, to go through the fact sheet. There's long documents, there's short documents. You can pick it up anywhere and just start to think about how you can make those small changes in your practice, in your organisations, to really get on board, so that we are truly doing culturally safe work that is keeping Aboriginal children and young people safe in their communities and with their families. Thank you so much, Bill. Is there any final words of wisdom that you would like to leave us with?
What final words of wisdom? I want to acknowledge and thank you for your support, Julie, and Anthony and Rebecca. Look, it's, you know, I mean, DCJ gets a bad rap sometimes. This was a really difficult thing for them as well. But Anthony and his team and Rebecca's team and previous teams, because of the have been engaged, and that is important. And it was co-designed with the community, but it was co-designed with DCJ as well. And we haven't always there's been a couple of tanties, I think, but you know, we've worked things out, and we've actually, I think, we've all stayed on the same page. This is about the children and families of Aboriginal people in New South Wales. And I want to thank everybody for turning up today and showing interest. And like I said, feel free to contact us at AbSec. AJ will mostly be the main contact going forward. Like I say, I'm more in a consultant role at the moment, but you will have my email, and if I don't know, as always, if I don't know it, I'll make it up. Thank you.
And I think that's the perfect place to land. Look, thank you, everybody. If you do think of any questions after this, you can always just email us at info@fams.asm.au. We will make sure that we connect you with AbSec. And yeah, stay safe, everybody. Yep, go Bill.
Just one more. I think there's a couple more fact sheets to go, a few more. They're going up on your website as well, are they, Julie, or on the NGO website?
We tend to just drive everybody to where they live rather than hosting multiple versions, particularly when there's updates of things, people get confused. So we're happy to drive people to the AbSec landing page or the DCJ landing page, wherever is the most sensible place. But absolutely, we will share all those links.
There's a few more coming through just at the moment. We'll keep you posted when they're all up as well.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, everybody. Stay safe.
See you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Hello.